folks, it's Abby. How are you doing this fabulous June sunny day? At least I hope it's sunny whenever this actually goes up. And today I'm actually going to be telling you about the books that I read in May. So May was an interesting month and I ended up rushing to catch up at the end to try and finish my TBR. But I managed it. I finished all of my TBR. So today I'm going to be going through all of those books. Also, I know you're going to be so happy. I've brought back balancing the books. I had a month off in April because of a bereavement, but I'm back on my bullshit, balancing my books, and I actually ended up doing some more calculations and figuring out that I had my numbers slightly wrong by 1 or 2 before, so I have corrections for that, and we can have a look. Firstly though, something which no one else cares about, but I do, and that is that I read a fair few geological magazines over May, mainly at the beginning of May. I've just been trying to get through these. I think I mentioned before, but I'm a Royal Geological Society member, so you get these along with that, and I just hadn't read them. Like, this first one here is from November 2019. I just never read them. So I finally have been sitting down and actually getting through them, and I've got through a good chunk. I now only have one geoscience magazine left because it's a brand new one that just arrived, so I think that one's fair enough. But then taking a look at the physical books, first up we have Rebel Heart by Moira Young. So this is the second book in the Blood Red Road series, and this is a dystopian YA novella which is set in a future America, and we are following primarily a young girl, although we do switch to some different points of view, as she tries to survive in this landscape, and her twin brother is kidnapped in the first one, and so she goes and tries to get him back, and adventures entail. Obviously I can't tell you too much because it's book 2, but yes, this was quite enjoyable. I didn't love it. I think it's a 3.5 star. But it's fun. I'm glad I'm finally getting around to the series, and I'm looking forward to reading the last one because this may have just been middle book syndrome. Then next up I read my non-fiction for the month, which was Living Planet by David Attenborough. This is a republication. The original book came out in the 80s, but some decently significant changes have been made in here. A lot of changes to the species that are mentioned and the examples that are given, as well as updated scientific information because it has been 40 years since the original one was published. This was fascinating. I loved it so much. There were some chapters on fish. I'm not a fish kind of girl, so I did not enjoy those. However, the first chapter, volcanology, mwah, perfection, and the rest of it was just super interesting, looking at all of the different climates around the world, just the northern forests, the kind of Arctic climes, the rainforests. Fascinating. I also loved learning about the desert environments and the drawings and the artwork that we found there from prehistoric people that shows that it wasn't always a desert, because we couldn't have lived in that. We still can't. This was amazing. I loved it so much. Is anyone surprised? And then audiobooks. So the first audiobook that I finished up was The Hobbit. I'm finally reading these because I am one of the co-hosts for the Middle-earth-a-thon, link up here, and I have not read the Lord of the Rings books. So I'm getting through them. So I finally listened to The Hobbit. You can find the audiobook free on Spotify, which is pretty awesome, and it was really fun. Gandalf is a bit of a knob, and Bilbo is long-suffering, I imagine. It was enjoyable. If you don't know, it's one of the classic high fantasy stories that almost everything else is based off of. I saw so much of what other authors that I've loved have taken from this story, so very much worth reading. Then I read a tiny little ebook which was 10 pages long, and that is Freak Like Me by Hannah O'Donnell, our wonderful very own Ladette M. So this, like I said, is tiny. That is my only issue with this. I read it, it was amazing. Hannah, can you make it a full story please? It was really good. So this is a little story about a world where when you're born, you then have a familiar, an animal, that comes to you and lives its life with you, and you know, most people get, you know, like a little cute kitty, or like our main character's parents both have birds, so they assume she's going to have birds, but she doesn't. She has a snake. I cut all of that because I basically just told you the 10-page story. Yeah, familiars, going for like typical familiars to non-typical, judgment in society, beautifully done. I would love to read an entire book in this world. Hannah, please. please. Then back to another audiobook, and this time it was A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is another short one. It's written in verse, and the audiobook itself is read out by Reynolds, which I loved because when something's written in verse, obviously there's intention and intonation behind every word, so I think it's a really well done audiobook. This is about a young black family where one of the siblings, the oldest brother, has been murdered in gang activity. He's been shot dead, and his younger brother is trying to live the rules, which is you don't cry, you don't snitch, and you get revenge, essentially. And the story is about this young boy going down in the lift, in the elevator, with the gun that he's going to go and shoot the man that he believes killed, or the boy that he believes killed his older brother. And at every floor on the lift, someone new gets on, who then talks to him about what he's doing, because these new people who get on aren't here anymore. They're dead from gang violence. Incredible, incredible story, really impactful, absolutely beautiful. I highly, highly, highly recommend. I'm slightly mad it took me this long to get to. I want a physical copy. It's won a million awards for a reason. It's gorgeous. Then for a book that was gifted to me by Carrie from Caring for Books, and that is Binti, the complete trilogy. This is all 3 stories which are short novellas in the Binti series, as well as an extra short little novella at the end, sandwiched between book 1 and 2. I love this so much. So I listened to the first book of Binti last month, and I enjoyed it, but my audiobook was messed up for some reason and played in the wrong order, so it was kind of weird, so I just reread that this time, as well as then reading the mini-story and then the other 2 books. I didn't want this to end. I was so mad that I didn't have any more stories. This is set in kind of a future sci-fi-esque world where our main character Binti, she decides, because she's been given a scholarship, that she's going to go to this university that's off-planet. It's really prestigious. However, on the transport ship to the university, another race boards, another species, and they murder everyone apart from her. The story goes from there. It's amazing, it's beautiful, it's fantastic. I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's amazing. I am 100% picking up more from Inedia Okorafor because, oh, this is so good. I really had a great reading month because another one that I loved, Graceling by Kristin Kershaw. So this is your standard classic YA fantasy. I don't even know when this was originally published. Let's see if I can see. 2008. That kind of YA fantasy. And I'm mad it took me this long to pick up because I loved it. So this one, we follow a girl called Katza, I'm very bad with names, who has a grace, which is kind of a special power in this world, to be able to kill people. She discovers this when an uncle tries to grope her a little bit when she's a child, and she reacts instinctively to protect herself, and he dies. She is then manipulated by her other uncle, who is the king of her realm, to be used as a mercenary, as an executioner, and as a threat. And so we follow this world where she is trying to do good whilst being controlled by this man, whilst also learning more about her power and learning more about the worlds around her. I loved it so much. My only 2 complaints are, 1, the naming conventions in this bother me deeply. I'm sure you might have heard that one of the characters in this is called Bitter Blue. Like, so I can get past that, that's just weird. And then the other complaint that I have is that there is a romance in this. That's not my complaint. It's a very slow build, but then the switch from slow build to not is very sudden, and I wish that that had been handled a little bit differently, but regardless, I still loved it, and I'm still really excited to carry on with the series. I was annoyed when I found out that Fire doesn't carry on directly from this, but then I have been told by Veronica from Veronica's Shelf that it links in more than it suggests, so I'm very excited to carry on with this series. I'm over here to tell you about Wild and Wicked Things by Francesca May. This was my Goldsboro book for the month. It's so fucking beautiful. This was a 5-star read. 1, it's like actually physically stunning, which is always helpful, but 2, it's just so beautifully written. So this is set in the 1920s in a world where magic had been utilised in the First World War. They have now criminalised magic. You can't use it anymore because of the negative impacts that it had during the war. But there is an island where it's as if they kind of ignore these laws, and our main character ends up going there to visit because her estranged father, who just left the family and went to live on this island years ago, has passed away, and specifically asked her to come and sort out his belongings. There's so much that goes on in this. I don't even know where to start, but there is non-binary representation, as well as lesbian romance and death and magic, and it's beautiful. Like, it's actually beautiful, not just physically, and I am so glad that I read it. It's so good, it's so good. And then a book with a very different vibe, but I still very much enjoyed it, and that is The Big Over Easy by Jasper Fforde. So this is the first book in the Nursery Crime Division series, and it is kind of a spin-off in the same world as the Thursday Next series, with the first book being The Air Affair for that one. In this story we have nursery rhyme characters like Humpty Dumpty existing in the real world, and when crimes happen to them, when they are involved in things that police procedurals would then have to look into, they have a specific division, the Nursery Crime Division, that go and look after them. This division is seen as stupid by everybody else, it's seen as a waste of time, but a lot happens, and in this book, Humpty Dumpty is murdered. He falls off of his wall, or does he fall? Is he pushed? Is he shot? This one, filled with hilarious British humour, very similar to Terry Pratchett's humour style. In fact, Terry Pratchett is quoted in here on his opinions on The Air Affair, saying, "Ingenious, I'll watch Jasper Fforde nervously," if you need to know about his style. But then also, it's a genuinely very well done mystery. Lots kind of comes in, lots is hinted at but that you don't realise earlier on. It's just so much fun, and I'm now back on my Jasper Fforde kick. I need more. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I somehow knew nothing going into this, like genuinely. The synopsis on the back of this just tells you about Oscar Wilde, so I only knew the title. I knew that there was a painting and that it was a man called Dorian Gray. This is all I knew. So this was a big shock to me when I actually read it. As you probably already know, a painting is made of the man called Dorian Gray, and he half jokingly, not really joking, but doesn't think it's going to happen, says like, oh, if only the painting could take on my aging and my sins and I could stay forever young and beautiful. And then it happens. Really fascinating. There was one chapter in the middle where I just wanted it to fucking end. But other than that, I really enjoyed this, and thank you so much to Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe for gifting me this. Next up was the Illumicrate book, which was Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. I was very disappointed with this book box and with the redesign of this book. See it up here. But I did find the book interesting. Really, really interesting. So I will say I did have some issues with it. The character development was quite poor and needed more done to it, and I'll explain the plot in a second, but the plans that they set out really needed altering. The plot is that we have 5 Chinese Americans who live across the entirety of the United States, and they are linked by one boy, one young man, and they are recruited by a very rich woman in China to steal back certain artifacts that belong to China that are just being stored in museums across Europe and North America because colonialism. I 100% agree with that concept. Give it all back. But the execution wasn't quite there. There is a character in this who's actually based off of the author's sister, and everyone hates her, and so the author's sister's quite sad about it. But like, I don't blame them because she is so poorly developed. Don't get me wrong, by like this point I can kind of see more like about this author's sister, and like she seems like a nice person in her TikToks and stuff, so like that makes more sense. But she was developed incredibly poorly, and I think it's because the author obviously has this innate knowledge of her sister, so if she's just writing her as a character, she doesn't develop her properly to the audience because she already knows all of this. Like, oh yeah, of course you know what my sister's like. No, we don't. Meaning that the character that has been named Irene has very poor development, seems like a complete and utter bitch up until like right at the end. She seems like a fucking cow. Essentially, this could have done with another round of core edits. I really enjoyed the writing style, the concept is fascinating, the discussions on Chinese Americans I found really interesting. I can't speak to their accuracy, of course, I'm neither Chinese nor American, but I found them very interesting, and the topics on like stolen art, fascinating. So it's a good book, but it's very much a debut, and I would be interested to see what more Lee comes out with in the future. Then I finished off the This Mortal Coil, is that Yes, it is. I keep forgetting which one's the first and which one's the second. The This Mortal Coil trilogy by Emily Savada. Oh, this series. So I started reading it years ago now. And the first book follows a young girl who is living on her own in the middle of the woods because there is an outbreak across the entire world of this virus where if you get it, you explode. It's also in a world where you can manipulate your genetics. Gene hackers are a thing. I cannot tell you about the plot in this whatsoever because like that is like the first 20 pages of the first book. Anything else is a massive spoiler. This series is fantastic. I love it. The author herself has got degrees in mathematics and astrophysics with a fascination in genetic engineering and what it means to be human. So she has the scientific background to be able to play around with this concept, and she does it beautifully. But this series is fantastic. I know that for some people at the moment it would be difficult to handle, so if you can, I highly, highly recommend. My final book. Pyramids by Terry Pratchett. So yeah, my other half has been trying to get me to get back into reading these for ages. It's his favourite author, he's got tattoos of these, so finally delved in, and this was actually the first Terry Pratchett Discworld novel that my partner read, and I'm glad I finally read it. I'm reading them in chronological order myself. This is a standalone in the Discworld universe, and it follows the son of the pharaoh of not Egypt. So much fun as always with anything done by Terry Pratchett. Absolutely hilarious, beautiful, wonderful, great. Will read more. This is a great standalone. If this one sounds interesting to you, with like the ancient Egyptian mythology intertwined with an assassin trained pharaoh, then you can read this one without reading the rest of the Discworld if you do want to. And that is it. Those are the books I read, but it doesn't say about the balancing. You'll have seen in the corner the little seesaw, but I haven't mentioned the new ones yet. This was a new in May because the box came late. So Wild and Wicked Things came in May and was read in May. So that's one that was like doop doop. And then I have 4 other books which I have to find. I should have thought this through. First up we have A River Called Time by Corsia Newland, and then also To Hold the Bridge by Garth Nix. This one I know almost nothing about. The Ark was built to save the lives of many, but rapidly became a refuge for the elite. The entrance closed without warning. And then this is some short stories in the Sabriel world. These were both sent to me from Olivia Savannah's Unhaul from Olivia's Catastrophe. Thank you very much, I'm very excited to read them. And then the other 2 I bought myself. We have the Illumicrate book. If you want to see the full unboxing, that's there, but Book of Night by Holly Black. And then the Goldsboro book for this month, which is The Collarbound by Rebecca Sahabi. Flipping back, because I need to look at my notes because I've been majorly confused. So I thought that I was starting out the month with 120 books unread on my TBR. I wasn't, I had 119. I don't know how I got the maths wrong, but I did. To simplify it down, out of the 13 books that I read this month, 10 of them were on my physical TBR, so from 120 down to 110. I brought 5 books in, so 115, but I read one of those 5 books in the 10. So, nice and confusingly, I'm at 114. I actually brought it down. What? I think it helps that I only had 5 books come in. I actually managed to get it down for once, like significantly down, not just equaling it or down by 1 or 2, so I'm very, very happy with that, especially because it's like my first month back. So that's the balancing of the books. Let me know down in the comments below what you read this month that was your favourite book. I am struggling to pick, like Binti, the complete Binti trilogy is amazing, Wild and Wicked Things, This Vicious Cure, Graceling, like I had a fantastic reading month. If you'd like to see some more from me, I come out with videos roughly every Saturday, bear with me. It's been a rough time lately, but I'm getting myself back on track now, so roughly every Saturday at 4 PM British time. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!